I am Julian, 35 years old. A few weeks ago, my profoundly entitled brother-in-law tried to hijack my only son's 10th birthday dinner and stick me with a $1,200 restaurant bill for a luxury party I never invited him to. While I was standing in the opulent, dimly lit lobby of the most exclusive Italian steakhouse in our entire city, watching my young son clutch his birthday present in pure disappointment, my own mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye and defended the parasite. She actually had the audacity to say, "Just pay for it, Julian. You make a good salary. Don't embarrass the family by making a scene over a few plates of food." They were sitting at my carefully reserved table, laughing loudly, ordering market-price lobster, and treating me like nothing more than an open wallet in front of dozens of other wealthy diners. But there was one massive, ruinous secret they did not know. They had absolutely no idea that I quietly own a 15% stake in the exact logistics firm that supplies every single cut of premium beef, every truffle, and every bottle of imported wine to that very restaurant. And right now, as I sit here telling you this, they are the ones facing the police, drowning in high-interest debt, facing potential lawsuits, and begging me for a financial bailout they will absolutely never get. Before I tell you exactly how I dropped the legal and financial hammer on them, hit that like button if you believe in absolute, unapologetic justice. And don't forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's go back to the exact moment this 10-year nightmare finally reached its breaking point. I am a logistics director. My entire life, my career, my sanity, and my worldview all revolve around one core concept: capacity management. You cannot fit a 50-foot shipping container onto a 40-foot chassis. It does not matter how much you want it to fit. It does not matter if you cry about it, throw a tantrum, or demand to speak to a manager. It does not matter if you insist that the container is family and deserves a free ride across the country. Physics does not negotiate, the supply chain does not care about your feelings, and neither do I. That is how I approach my highly stressful job, and frankly, that is exactly how I approach my personal finances. I grew up in a very modest, working-class household where every single dollar had a specific job. My parents, Victor and Martha, taught me the unshakable value of hard work. My father worked in a steel mill, and my mother was a public school teacher. They never had a silver spoon to hand me. I paid for my own college tuition by working night shifts at a warehouse. Now, at 35, I have a very comfortable salary, a maxed-out 401k, a growing real estate portfolio, and a fully funded college fund for my son. But I did not get here by letting people walk all over me or by giving handouts to adults who refuse to work. I built my life brick by solid brick. Tonight was supposed to be simple, elegant, and absolutely perfect. Tonight was my son Silas's 10th birthday. Double digits. The big 10. If you have kids, nieces, nephews, or grandkids, you know that turning 10 is a massive psychological milestone. It is the bridge between being a little boy who plays with action figures and becoming a young man who starts to understand how the world works. Silas is a quiet, incredibly sweet kid. He struggles a bit with his confidence at school, so I wanted this evening to be flawless. I wanted him to feel like the most important person in the room. I had planned this dinner with the relentless precision of a military extraction operation. I do not leave things to chance. The guest list was tightly and deliberately curated. It was me, my beautiful wife Clara, Silas's 3 absolute best friends from his 5th grade class, their parents, and my own parents, Victor and Martha. That is exactly 12 seats. 12 human beings. 12 place settings. I chose Lucas Italian Steakhouse. For those of you who know genuinely good food and high society dining, you know a place like Lucas is not some cheap, run-of-the-mill chain restaurant located next to a Walmart where you can just slide a few sticky tables together and demand extra breadsticks from an exhausted teenager. It is intensely old school. It has dark, polished mahogany wood paneling, dim, ambient lighting, heavy crystal glassware that costs more than a car payment, and waiters in crisp white jackets who literally sweep the artisan breadcrumbs off the table with a silver tool between courses. It is the kind of place where you make a reservation a month in advance with a hefty credit card deposit just to secure a time slot. I had specifically requested the alcove. It is a semi-private, luxurious space located in the very back of the main dining room, featuring one long, beautiful, custom-built oak table. It is perfect for intimate conversation, tucked just away from the noise and foot traffic of the main floor, but still possessing that vibrant restaurant atmosphere. I wanted Silas to feel like a young king holding court with his closest friends. Everything was locked in. The appetizers were meticulously pre-ordered to hit the table at exactly 6:45 p.m. sharp. Calamari and mozzarella for the kids, imported prosciutto and burrata for the adults. I had confirmed the exact head count with the restaurant manager not once, but twice. But there is one catastrophic, deeply toxic variable in my life that defies all logic. One variable that completely ignores capacity, budget, social cues, and basic human decency. My brother-in-law, Felix. Felix is 42 years old, and he is the textbook definition of what people nowadays call the golden child. I call him a walking financial sinkhole. You know the exact type of man I am talking about. He is the guy who borrows money with a grand promise to pay you back on Friday, blows it on something incredibly flashy to impress strangers, and then aggressively calls it a family gift when you finally ask for the money back. He believes the world owes him a luxury lifestyle simply because he breathes oxygen. And unfortunately, his parents, my deeply flawed in-laws Henry and Margaret, have spent the last 4 decades enabling him, bailing him out, and convincing him his delusions of grandeur are completely justified. I did not invite Felix to this dinner. I did not invite his equally entitled wife, Vanessa. I didn't invite their 3 loud, undisciplined teenagers. And I absolutely, under no circumstances, invited Felix's high-drama best friend Beatrice or her 2 screaming toddlers. So, I want you to imagine my exact state of mind when I walked through the heavy, brass-handled double doors of Lucas Italian Steakhouse at 6:30 p.m. I was feeling great. I was wearing a sharp suit. I had my hand resting proudly on Silas's shoulder. He was holding a new, complex building block set I had given him earlier in the day, grinning from ear to ear, showing off a missing tooth. Clara looked absolutely beautiful in a dark blue dress, though I could feel her hand trembling slightly in mine. She always gets anxious before social events, mostly because she carries the deep, unhealed trauma of her family's constant, exhausting drama. I squeezed her hand gently and told her everything was going to be perfect. "It is just us tonight," I promised her. I approached the polished host stand. The general manager, Lorenzo, is a man I have known professionally for over 5 years. Usually, Lorenzo possesses the calm, unbreakable demeanor of a seasoned diplomat negotiating a peace treaty. He has seen red wine spills on silk dresses, fistfights between wealthy patrons, and declined black credit cards without ever breaking a single sweat. But tonight, Lorenzo looked genuinely pale. He was sweating. He looked at me like a man who was about to deliver a terminal medical diagnosis. "Mr. Julian," Lorenzo said, his voice tight, strained, and entirely unnatural. He forced a very tight smile for my son. "Happy birthday to young Silas." "Thanks, Lorenzo," I said confidently, pulling out my reservation confirmation. "We are ready for the alcove. The rest of our 12-person party should be walking through those front doors any minute now." Lorenzo winced visibly. He actually flinched. He leaned heavily over the polished mahogany stand, lowering his voice so Silas wouldn't hear the panic in his tone. "Mr. Julian, I am so deeply sorry, but we have a very serious situation." My stomach immediately dropped into my shoes. In my line of work in logistics, the word situation usually means thousands of dollars are bleeding out somewhere on a highway, or a major client is about to file a massive lawsuit. "What kind of situation?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. "Your party," Lorenzo whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the bustling dining room. "They arrived early, and there are significantly more of them than we anticipated." "Significantly more, sir?" I frowned, completely confused by the math. "That is impossible, Lorenzo. My parents are parking their car in the lot right now. Silas's friends are exactly 5 minutes out. Nobody from my list is here yet." Lorenzo cleared his throat, adjusting his tie nervously. Your brother-in-law, Mr. Felix. He arrived 20 minutes ago. He informed my staff that he was family, that he was taking charge of the seating arrangements, and that you would be covering the entirety of the expanded tab. I felt the blood completely drain from my face, leaving a cold, sharp rage in its wake. I looked over at Clara. Her eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated terror. She hadn't told him the time. I hadn't told him the location. Who exactly is with him? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Everyone, Lorenzo said helplessly, gesturing vaguely toward the back of the restaurant. His wife, his 3 children, your in-laws, and another woman who brought 2 very active toddlers. I didn't wait to hear another word of the explanation. I let go of Clara's hand, walked past the host stand with heavy, determined steps, turned the corner into the main dining room, and stopped dead in my tracks. My carefully reserved alcove, the beautiful, quiet sanctuary I had pictured for weeks, looked like a chaotic, trash-filled frat house after a football game. The heavy oak table for 12 was completely packed with bodies, but it wasn't my son's friends sitting there. It was a hostile, calculated family takeover. And standing there in the dim light, I knew exactly how this ambush had been orchestrated. To truly understand the sheer, unmitigated audacity of what I was looking at in that steakhouse, you have to deeply understand the twisted architecture of my wife's family tree. Clara is the younger sister. In a normal, healthy family, siblings support each other, celebrate each other's wins, and split the burdens of aging parents. In Clara's family, Felix scorched the earth, salted the fields, and Clara was expected to quietly plant seeds in the ash while apologizing for the smoke. My in-laws, Henry and Margaret, are the kind of people who care obsessively about suburban appearances. They go to every single HOA meeting just to complain about their neighbor's lawn length. They want everyone in their social circle to think they are affluent, successful, and cultured. But their fatal, destructive flaw is their blinding, toxic enabling of Felix. They created this 42-year-old monster by never, ever letting him face a single real-world consequence for his reckless actions. When Felix failed out of a mid-tier college because he refused to attend classes, Margaret blamed the professors for not recognizing his unique learning style. When Felix got fired from his comfortable corporate marketing job for insubordination, Henry claimed the boss was simply jealous of Felix's raw talent. And when it comes to money, the delusion in that family reaches a clinical, almost terrifying level. My relationship with money is straightforward and entirely rooted in reality. I work incredibly hard, I invest my capital quietly, and I save aggressively for the future. I drive a reliable truck that is 5 years old because I do not care about impressing people at stoplights. I wear decent but unbranded clothes. I don't need to flash my bank account or wear a fake Rolex to feel like a man. Felix, on the other hand, is a walking billboard for impending financial ruin. He drives a leased Porsche Cayenne that he can barely afford the monthly insurance premium on. He wears designer watches that he buys on credit. He lives entirely for the image of wealth without doing any of the actual grueling labor required to build it. He survives on a strict diet of maxed-out credit cards, predatory personal loans, and secret, continuous bailouts from Henry and Margaret. I know this because I keep a very specific mental ledger of his offenses. Let me give you the receipts right now so you know exactly the caliber of parasite I am dealing with. Incident number 1 happened 5 years ago, right around Silas's 5th birthday. Felix, desperately trying to play the role of the big-shot wealthy uncle in front of our neighbors, loudly promised to handle the entertainment for the backyard party. He said he had an exclusive connection for a massive bounce house and a professional entertainer. "I'll book it, Jules. You just send me the $300 for the deposit, and I'll handle the rest. I want Silas to have the best," he told me, slapping me heavily on the back during a family barbecue. I foolishly sent him the money. The day of the party arrived. The sun was beating down. No bounce house, no entertainer, just a yard full of sweaty 5-year-olds crying because they had absolutely nothing to do. When I called Felix, he gave me a massive, convoluted sob story about the rental company going bankrupt overnight and fleeing the state. I found out 2 weeks later from a slip of the tongue by his wife, Vanessa, that he had never booked it. He used my $300 to pay off a speeding ticket in a school zone so his insurance premium wouldn't skyrocket. Did I ever see a dime of that money back? Absolutely not. When I brought it up to my mother-in-law, Margaret, she actually scolded me for being insensitive. Let it go, Julian. He is struggling financially right now. Don't make him feel worse. He was just too embarrassed to tell you the truth. $300 is nothing to you. Incident number 2 was the absolute breaking point for my wallet and my patience. Last year, Clara got a frantic, tearful phone call from Vanessa. Their only car had supposedly broken down on the side of a busy highway. They needed $500 immediately for an emergency alternator replacement, or Felix couldn't get to his new job and the kids couldn't get to high school. Clara was in tears, begging me to help them out. Against my better judgment, I transferred the money directly to Felix's account. It was for the kids, right? You don't let kids suffer because their parents are irresponsible. 2 days later, Felix posted a public photo on his social media. He was standing on a pristine, incredibly expensive private golf course with his best friend, Beatrice. They were holding up expensive cocktails. The caption read, "Much needed mental health day on the greens with my bestie. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself and ignore the haters. #blessed. I saw red. The kind of red that makes your vision blur. When I confronted him about it at the next mandatory Thanksgiving dinner, he didn't even have the basic decency to look ashamed. He just laughed it off, swirling his glass of red wine. Oh, the mechanic cut me a deal, Jules, so I had some leftover cash. I figured you wanted me to de-stress, man. My mental health was in the gutter. We're family, what's a few bucks between brothers?" That was the exact moment the Bank of Julian closed its doors permanently. I didn't yell. I just looked at him with absolute disgust. I sat Clara down that night in our living room and laid down the law. Never again. Not a single dollar. Not for groceries, not for medical emergencies, not for a potential lawsuit, not for an inheritance dispute, not for anything. He is cut off. Clara agreed. She saw the truth. But the pressure from her parents never, ever stopped. Henry and Margaret constantly dropped heavy, manipulative hints whenever we saw them. "Julian, you just got that big promotion to director. Felix is really drowning with his mortgage payments. Maybe you could co-sign a refinancing loan for him just to get his interest rate down." Or, "Julian, you guys are buying that new commercial real estate property? It's a shame Felix's kids don't have a big yard. Maybe you could let them live in one of your rental units for a few months rent-free to get back on their feet. Keep it in the family." They viewed my hard work, my stress, and my late nights at the office as a communal family resource. They viewed my patience as an infinite commodity to be mined. And that brings us directly to the catastrophic information leak that caused the disaster at the steakhouse. I was militant about keeping Silas's 10th birthday a total secret from Felix. I knew if he found out we were going somewhere expensive, he would see it as a prime opportunity to eat high-end food on my dime, take photos for his fake-rich social media persona, and show off to his friends. But exactly 2 weeks prior to the dinner, Clara was on the phone with her mother. I walked into the kitchen just in time to hear Clara, worn down by her mother's constant probing about our weekend plans, finally crack. "Yes, Mom, we're doing Lucas Italian Steakhouse for Silas next Saturday. Yes, the one downtown. We got the private alcove at 6:30. I waved my hands frantically, signaling her to stop talking, practically mouthing the word "no." But the damage was irreparably done. The intel was out in the wild. I knew Margaret would immediately hang up and relay this juicy piece of information to Felix. Margaret cannot keep a secret to save her life, especially if she thinks she can manufacture a family gathering. Felix loves to play the rich, generous host, as long as he isn't the one actually pulling out a credit card at the end of the night. I knew exactly what his plan was the moment I saw his table. He brought his high society wannabe friend Beatrice not because she cared about my son's birthday. She didn't even know Silas's middle name. He brought her because Felix desperately wanted an audience. He wanted to sit at a VIP table, order the most expensive wine on the menu, and have Beatrice look at him and think, wow, Felix really has it made. His family respects him so much. He is a provider. He was banking entirely on my well-known social awkwardness. He was banking on the fact that I am a professional who would never cause a screaming public scene in a fine dining establishment. He thought I would just absorb his massive financial intrusion, pay the exorbitant bill, and stay silent to protect Clara from her parents' inevitable wrath. He was right about one thing. I absolutely despise causing a public scene. It goes against every fiber of my professional being. But he was dead wrong about how I handle a barricade. When a massive logistics route is blocked by an immovable object, you don't smash your multimillion-dollar truck into the concrete wall. You reroute. You isolate the problem, you adjust the supply chain, and you let the obstacle destroy itself through its own sheer incompetence. I stood at the edge of the main dining room, the heavy scent of truffles, roasted garlic, and aged beef filling the air. My eyes swept over the hijacked alcove, and the reality of the situation was infinitely worse than I could have ever imagined. The long, beautiful oak table designed specifically for 12 people was completely packed shoulder to shoulder. But sitting at the very head of the table, in the grand, oversized leather chair specifically reserved for my son, the birthday boy, was Felix. He was holding a massive crystal wine glass by the bowl, swirling dark red wine, laughing obnoxiously loud with his head thrown back. Next to him was Vanessa, aggressively buttering a piece of artisan bread and complaining to the waiter about the temperature of the room. Their 3 teenagers were slumped deep in their chairs, glowing smartphone screens illuminating their utterly bored, disconnected faces. Henry and Margaret, my in-laws, were seated comfortably in the middle of the chaos, sipping ice water with lemons, looking incredibly pleased with themselves for orchestrating this beautiful family reunion. And filling out the rest of the space was Beatrice, wearing a fake designer dress, along with her 2 toddlers who were currently banging heavy silver spoons against the imported bone china plates. Clang, clang, clang. 10 people. Not a single one of them invited. Not a single one of them possessing the decency to call and ask. And standing awkwardly in the hallway behind me, looking like displaced refugees at a border crossing, were my actual guests. My parents, Victor and Martha, holding beautifully wrapped gifts, their faces a mix of confusion and polite horror. Silas's friend Gregory and his father, a respected local architect, were staring at the table, completely bewildered by the sheer lack of manners on display. I looked down at Silas. He wasn't looking at the fancy chandeliers or the dessert cart rolling by. He was staring directly at his Uncle Felix occupying his birthday throne. The pure excitement had completely drained from my son's eyes, replaced by a hollow, defeated sadness. He looked like he knew, deep down in his 10-year-old heart, that his special night had just been stolen from him by the very people who were supposed to love him. That look on my son's face was the match hitting the gasoline. I felt a cold, hyper-focused, terrifying rage settle into the center of my chest. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit. I walked slowly, deliberately, right up to the head of the table, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet. Felix finally noticed me. He didn't look guilty. He didn't even flinch. He threw his arms up in a grand, theatrical gesture, nearly knocking over a lit candle. "Julian, the man of the hour. Surprise, brother," he bellowed. Several heads from nearby tables turned to look at us, annoyed by his volume. "We decided to make it a real family affair," Felix announced loudly, projecting his voice, making sure Beatrice was watching him. "You can't let the boy turn 10 without the whole village, right? We got here early to lock down the spot. I told that stiff manager up front that we were the VIP party. He tried to give me grief about the head count, claiming fire codes or some nonsense, but I told him I'm family. Just squeeze in some extra chairs." I looked at the table. There was barely room to squeeze in a paper napkin, let alone 12 more human beings. The heavy winter coats and luxury handbags belonging to Vanessa and Beatrice were sprawled aggressively across the only 2 empty chairs at the far end. "Felix," I said, my voice dead level and terrifyingly quiet, Where exactly is Silas going to sit? Oh, we'll figure it out, man. Felix waved his hand dismissively, reaching for another piece of bread. The kids can squeeze into a booth near the bar, or maybe you adults can just stand and mingle. Treat it like a cocktail hour. Sapardi, Jules. Loosen up. Don't be so rigid all the time. You work too hard. That was the exact moment Henry, my father-in-law, chimed in. He gave me a nervous, placating smile, trying to act as the peacekeeper. Come on, Julian. Just tell the waiter to bring over another table and attach it. It's fine. We're all here now. Let's just celebrate and put family first. I completely ignored Henry. My eyes dropped to the center of the table. Sitting next to Felix's plate was a bottle of wine. I recognized the label instantly. It was a Barolo, a 2018 vintage. I know the menu at Lucas intimately because I handle the supply chain that brings that exact wine into the country. That specific bottle is $140 on the menu. I counted the bottles on the table. One was completely empty, shoved near the breadbasket. One was half empty in front of Vanessa. One was freshly uncorked, breathing next to Felix. 3 bottles. For $120 in wine before I had even spoken my first word to them. Before my son had even been wished a happy birthday. Before a single piece of actual food had touched their plates. Get up, I said. The entire table went dead silent. Beatrice's toddler stopped banging the spoon. Felix's teenagers actually looked up from their phones, sensing the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. Excuse me, Felix said, his arrogant smile faltering for a fraction of a second, his eyes narrowing. This is a reservation for 12 people, I said, projecting my voice just enough so the surrounding wealthy diners could hear the absolute finality in my tone. There are 12 invited guests standing in the hallway right now. You are occupying their seats. You were not invited. Get up. Vanessa let out a dramatic, high-pitched gasp, clutching her pearls. Julian, don't be so incredibly rude. We are family. We drove 40 minutes in terrible traffic to get here to celebrate your son. You came here to drink expensive wine on my tab, Vanessa? I snapped back. My patience entirely evaporated. I looked dead into Felix's eyes. Move. Now, get out of my son's chair. Felix crossed his arms, his face hardening into that stubborn, deeply entitled mask I despised with every fiber of my being. The exact same mask he wore when he stole the bounce house money. The mask of a man who firmly believed the rules of society did not apply to him. No, Felix stated, leaning back deeply in the leather chair. We are seated. We have already ordered appetizers. We are staying right here. If you want to be a terrible father and ruin Silas's birthday by throwing a massive temper tantrum and making a public scene, that is 100% on you. But I am not moving my family. I am a guest in this establishment. He picked up a heavy, leather-bound menu and casually flicked it open. Now, I think I'm going to have the lobster risotto. I hear it's fantastic. My mother-in-law, Margaret, stood up slightly, her face pale, desperate to avoid a social scandal. Julian, please, don't embarrass us. People are staring at us. Just pay for it. You make a good salary. Be the bigger man. It's just dinner. Family is everything. I looked at Margaret, feeling nothing but cold pity. It is my son's birthday, Margaret. Not a charity soup kitchen for your son's unchecked ego. Felix smirked, clearly believing he had won the standoff. He knew I wouldn't physically drag him out of the chair in a high-end restaurant. He knew calling security would terrify Silas and ruin the evening. He thought he had me completely trapped in a social hostage situation, bound by my own manners and my desire to protect my wife from conflict. But I didn't feel trapped. I felt a supreme, icy clarity. In my line of work, you constantly assess liability and leverage. If I screamed, I looked unhinged. If I forced them out, I ruined my son's night. But there was a third option, the logistical pivot. I looked at Felix, who was smugly pouring himself another glass of the Barolo, entirely convinced that my bank account was about to fund his luxury fantasy. And then I walked away. I didn't say another word to Felix. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I turned my back on the table, leaving him stewing in his own arrogant victory, and walked directly over to Lorenzo, who was hovering near a marble pillar, looking like he was preparing to call the police to prevent a fistfight. I put a firm, reassuring hand on Lorenzo's shoulder and guided him a few steps away into the hallway, completely out of earshot of the main dining room. "Lorenzo," I said softly, my voice completely devoid of panic, resonating with the calm authority of a man executing a flawless contingency plan. "Do you still have the executive boardroom available in the back? The one with the heavy soundproof oak doors and the private AV equipment?" Lorenzo's eyes widened slightly. He knew exactly what room I was talking about. It was the premier room of the restaurant, usually reserved strictly for high-stakes corporate closures, wealthy politicians, and Tier 1 VIPs. "The boardroom?" "Yes, Mr. Julian. It is completely empty tonight. It is very secluded, all the way past the kitchens." "Perfect," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Here is exactly what we are going to do. You are going to move my party, the real party, the 12 people standing right here in the lobby looking terrified, into the executive boardroom. You are going to set it up for 12. Move the birthday cake to the back room. Move the presents to the back room. Bring the pre-ordered appetizers straight there." Lorenzo nodded quickly, immensely relieved that I wasn't demanding a public brawl that would disrupt the other diners. "Consider it done immediately, sir. I will have the staff turn the room over in 3 minutes. And what about the party at the alcove?" He tilted his head nervously toward Felix's circus, where loud laughter was now echoing. I looked back at the table. Felix was loudly commanding the young, terrified waiter, Matteo, pointing aggressively at the menu and acting like he owned the building. "They seem very comfortable," I said, a cold, predatory smile touching the corners of my mouth. "Leave them exactly where they are. Do not tell them where we are going. Do not move them. Do not ask them to leave." Lorenzo looked deeply confused. "Understood, sir. But the billing." This was the exact moment I set the trap. This was the moment I decided to stop fighting and let financial gravity do its brutal, unyielding work. I reached into the breast pocket of my tailored suit jacket and pulled out my wallet. I did not pull out my personal debit card. I did not pull out a standard credit card. I extracted my heavy, metal corporate black card. The card that explicitly flagged me in their point-of-sale system as a Tier 1 vendor and partial owner of their supply chain. "This card covers the party in the executive boardroom," I said clearly, handing the heavy metal to Lorenzo. "The 12 guests I actually invited. The food, the drinks, the generous tip for that room, and absolutely nothing else. Not a single penny more." "And table 4? Lorenzo asked, looking nervously at the empty Barolo bottles Felix was proudly displaying, doing the math in his head. "Table 4 is a completely independent group," I said, articulating every single syllable so there was absolutely zero room for misinterpretation. "Treat them as off-the-street walk-ins. They are a separate check. I repeat, separate checks. Do not, under any circumstances, authorize any charges to my card from that table. If they try to put it on my tab, you decline it immediately and present them with the bill. If they argue, you treat them like any other customer who refuses to pay for services rendered. Is that absolutely 100% clear?" Lorenzo looked down at the black card in his hand. He looked back up at me, a small, sharp, incredibly satisfied smile of profound understanding slowly spread across his face. He hated arrogant customers just as much as I did. He knew exactly what I was doing. I was handing them the rope to hang themselves. "Crystal clear, Mr. Julian," Lorenzo said, his posture straightening. "I will inform Matteo and the rest of the serving staff immediately. Separate checks." I walked back into the main lobby and gathered Clara, Silas, my parents, and Gregory's family. I wiped every trace of anger off my face and put on my best, warmest host smile. "Change of plans, everyone," I announced cheerfully, clapping my hands together once. "There was a slight mix-up with the main seating arrangements, but Lorenzo here has graciously upgraded us to the private executive suite in the back. It is much more exclusive, much quieter, and we get our own dedicated waitstaff. Follow me. Silas's eyes lit up immediately. The crushing sadness vanished, replaced by sheer awe. A private suite? Like for VIPs? Like in the movies? Exactly like VIPs, buddy, I promised, ruffling his hair. Just for us. The best room in the house. We bypassed the main dining room entirely. Lorenzo led us down a side corridor, past the bustling, loud, stainless steel kitchen, and toward the back of the building. But just before we turned the final corner to safety, we passed an archway that gave a clear, unobstructed view of the alcove. Felix, who was busy taking a selfie with his wine glass, spotted us walking away out of the corner of his eye. He half rose from his stolen chair, a piece of crusty bread halfway to his mouth. "Hey, where are you guys going?" he shouted across the elegant restaurant, drawing more annoyed stares from the surrounding tables. "We found another table," I called back over my shoulder, keeping my tone light, cheerful, and incredibly vague. "You guys stay right there. Enjoy the food. Order whatever you want. We'll catch up after dessert." "Oh, great!" Felix yelled back, sitting down heavily, looking like a man who had just conquered a small nation. He looked completely triumphant. He turned to Beatrice and laughed loudly. I could easily read his lips from 30 feet away. "See? I told you he'd handle it. He always folds." I stopped for just 1 second and watched as Felix grabbed the young waiter, Matteo, aggressively by the arm. "Hey, buddy, bring us a grand seafood tower for the table. The big one with the oysters and crab legs. And bring me the tomahawk ribeye. Make it medium rare. And another bottle of that red wine. The expensive one. Keep it flowing." Felix thought he had won the ultimate victory. He thought he had successfully bullied me into expanding the party, forcing me to absorb his massive intrusion into my budget like a spineless coward. He thought the Bank of Julian was fully open for business and he had the unlimited company credit card at his disposal. He thought he was proving his dominance. I turned away and walked into the executive boardroom. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind us, instantly silencing the noise, the drama, and the toxicity of the main restaurant. It was absolutely stunning. Dark wood paneling, pristine white tablecloths, vintage black and white photographs of the city on the walls, and a massive chandelier casting a warm glow. "Wow, Julian, this is incredible," my father, Victor, said, looking around approvingly, clearly impressed. "Way better than being out there in the noise. You really pulled out all the stops for Silas." "Nothing but the absolute best for my son," I said, pulling out a chair for Clara. She sat down, looking at me with a mixture of immense relief and deep, lingering confusion. "Julian, what about my parents? What about the bill?" she whispered. I just winked at her, poured her a glass of sparkling water, and kissed her on the cheek. "Do not worry about a single thing tonight. The logistics are handled." The waiters in the boardroom were incredibly attentive. They brought out the calamari and bruschetta immediately. They treated Silas like absolute royalty, bringing him a special mocktail with 3 cherries. The mood was perfect, peaceful, and full of genuine love and celebration. The kids were laughing, the parents were chatting, and the food was spectacular. But as I sat there, slicing into my filet mignon and sipping my water, I checked the heavy diver's watch on my wrist. It was exactly 6:55 p.m. The fuse was officially lit. 40 feet away, on the other side of that soundproof wall, Felix was ordering lobster. He was ordering premium, market-price steak. He was pouring $140 wine down his throat. And he had absolutely no idea that he was eating every single bite on his own dime. He didn't know he was building a financial guillotine over his own head. The clock was ticking, and when that check finally dropped, it was going to be a bloodbath. Inside the heavily insulated walls of the executive boardroom, time seemed to stand completely still. For the very first time in my entire 10-year marriage to Clara, we were hosting a significant family event without the suffocating, toxic cloud of Felix's massive ego hovering over the dinner table. The contrast between this room and every other family gathering we had ever endured was absolutely staggering. There was no loud, obnoxious boasting about fabricated real estate deals that never materialized. There were no passive-aggressive comments about my salary from my mother-in-law, Margaret, designed to make Felix look like the superior provider. There was just genuine, unfiltered, authentic joy. Silas was absolutely glowing. He sat directly at the head of the pristine white tablecloth, surrounded by his best friends, diving enthusiastically into a massive plate of authentic spaghetti carbonara. Gregory's father, a very successful local architect who usually despises mandatory social dinners, was leaning back in his heavy leather chair, laughing loudly at a story my dad was telling about his old warehouse days. My parents, Victor and Martha, were simply enjoying the high-quality food and the peaceful atmosphere. Clara looked more radiant than I had seen her in years. I watched the deep physical tension visibly melt out of her shoulders. She was sipping her sparkling water, entirely present in the moment, completely unaware of the brutal financial execution that was slowly and methodically taking place exactly 40 feet away on the other side of those soundproof mahogany doors. But while my family was celebrating and making beautiful memories, my mind was running complex, relentless logistical calculations. In my profession, you never just monitor the final destination of a shipment. You monitor every single step of the entire supply chain. You calculate weight, fuel, speed, and potential points of failure. And right now, the supply chain over at Table 4 in the main dining room was heavily overloaded, completely unbalanced, and heading for a catastrophic high-speed derailment. I knew exactly how Felix operated when he firmly believed that someone else was footing the bill. He does not just eat to satisfy hunger. He consumes aggressively and gluttonously to prove his fabricated worth to anyone watching. He uses expensive food and liquor as props to build his completely fake persona. I checked the heavy diver's watch on my left wrist. It was 8:15 p.m. The main courses would have been cleared by the waitstaff by now. They would be moving on to the dessert menus, ordering rounds of espresso, and likely demanding even more high-end alcohol to keep the illusion going for Beatrice. Every single bite Felix took, every single sip of that imported Barolo wine he swallowed, was adding massive compound interest to his impending doom. He was essentially building a brick wall across a highway and driving his own leased sports car directly toward it at 100 miles an hour. My phone vibrated sharply in the breast pocket of my tailored suit. I pulled it out under the table to shield the glow. It was a direct text message from Lorenzo, the general manager. Mr. Julian, I wanted to keep you fully updated on the independent party at Table 4. They have just ordered the grand seafood plateau. 1 tomahawk ribeye, billed at market price. 2 orders of lobster risotto. A 3rd bottle of Barolo. They are currently acting incredibly demanding toward Matteo, and are now loudly requesting a complimentary round of Limoncello shots to celebrate your recent corporate promotion. How would you like us to proceed with their demands? I stared at the glowing screen under the table, my jaw clenching slightly. A tomahawk steak is a massive, bone-in cut of premium beef designed to feed multiple people. It usually runs about $125 on a busy Saturday night, sometimes more depending on the market rate of the meat. Felix ordered that specific item not because he was starving for beef, but solely because it was the single most expensive item printed in bold letters on the menu. He wanted to feel powerful. He wanted Beatrice to see him tearing into a giant piece of meat like a wealthy, generous king treating his loyal subjects. And he was doing it all on the arrogant assumption that my hard-earned corporate salary was his personal, unlimited slush fund. I quickly typed my response with one thumb. Do absolutely nothing to stop them, Lorenzo. Let him order the entire kitchen inventory if he wants it. Serve the Limoncello shots. Bring them whatever they demand. Just make sure the check remains completely separate and strictly itemized down to the last penny. Do not give them a single discount. Bring us the dessert menus in the boardroom when you have a moment. I slid the phone back into my pocket, feeling a cold, calculating, and deeply satisfying sense of justice settling into my bones. I was not angry anymore. Anger is an uncontrolled emotion. Anger makes you sloppy. I was operating on pure, unadulterated logic. I looked across the table at Clara, who smiled at me warmly. I loved this woman with everything I had. But for 10 long, exhausting years, she had been a complete emotional hostage to her sister's husband and her parents' relentless enabling behavior. Tonight, I was going to set her entirely free. Not by screaming in a restaurant, not by threatening a messy divorce over family boundaries, and not by initiating a bitter lawsuit. I was going to set her free by letting the undeniable, heavy truth land on Felix with the weight of an iron anvil. By 9 p.m., we had finished our spectacular desserts. The waitstaff brought out a custom chocolate cake for Silas, completely covered in lit candles. We sang happy birthday loudly and off-key. He blew out the candles in one giant breath, his eyes shining with pure joy. The room was filled with warm applause and laughter. It was the peaceful, respectful, perfect family gathering I had always dreamed of providing for my son. I had successfully insulated him from the toxicity that usually ruined these events. And then, exactly at 9:15 p.m., the heavy oak door of the executive boardroom opened just a tiny fraction of an inch. Lorenzo slipped inside with the grace of a shadow, pulling the door shut behind him quickly to block out the noise of the outside world. He looked incredibly tense, his professional smile completely gone. He walked briskly over to my chair and leaned down, his voice barely a whisper against my ear. "Mr. Julian, I deeply apologize for the interruption during this beautiful celebration, but the independent party has received their itemized check. I need you on the main floor immediately. The situation is escalating rapidly." I wiped my mouth slowly and deliberately with my linen napkin, placed it on the table, and stood up. Clara looked up at me, a flash of her old, deep-seated anxiety instantly returning to her eyes. She knew that look on my face. "Is everything okay, Julian?" she asked, her voice dropping a register. "Everything is perfectly fine, honey," I said, giving her a reassuring nod and a soft smile. "I just need to go out to the front desk and settle our bill with Lorenzo to wrap things up. You guys start helping Silas open the presents. I will be right back in a few minutes." I stepped out of the boardroom and pulled the heavy door completely shut until the brass latch clicked securely. The second that door closed, the sheer volume of the main dining room hit me like a physical, suffocating wave. Clattering dishes, the loud chatter of wealthy patrons, and cutting right through all of that ambient noise was the unmistakable, screeching, hysterical voice of my brother-in-law. "This is an absolute outrage. I am not paying this garbage. You are trying to scam us. Go get my brother-in-law right now." I walked down the quiet, carpeted hallway, feeling the adrenaline begin to pump steadily through my veins, and turned the corner into the main dining area. The scene at table 4 was a complete and utter disaster zone. The beautiful, elegant alcove looked like a hurricane had ripped through it. Crumpled linen napkins were thrown carelessly on the floor. Dark purple wine stains soaked into the pristine white tablecloth. Half-eaten pieces of expensive lobster shell and discarded crab claws were scattered everywhere, resembling a culinary graveyard. And standing directly in the center of the absolute chaos was Felix. His face was flushed a deep, unhealthy beet red from the excessive alcohol and the boiling rage. His tie was loosened. He was aggressively waving a black leather billfold directly in the face of Mateo, the terrified, young waiter who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "I demand to see the manager. I demand to see the owner of this establishment," Felix bellowed, his voice echoing sharply off the dark mahogany walls. The entire restaurant had stopped eating. The wealthy couple at the adjacent table had put their silver forks down, watching the spectacle in pure, unadulterated disgust. A local politician sitting near the bar was shaking his head in disbelief. Felix was humiliating himself on a monumental public scale, completely unaware of how incredibly pathetic he looked to everyone else in the room. I walked calmly and steadily toward the table. As I got closer, I could clearly see my in-laws, Henry and Margaret. They were shrunk down deeply into their leather seats, looking completely mortified and terrified. They desperately wanted the public image of immense wealth, but they were currently starring in a loud, aggressive public spectacle of poverty, classlessness, and entitlement. Beatrice, the friend Felix wanted to impress so badly, was frantically looking at her smartphone, her face pale, clearly calculating her escape route out the front doors. "I am right here, Felix," I said. My voice was not loud. I did not yell, but it carried a heavy, authoritative weight that cut through his drunken screaming with absolute precision. Felix spun around wildly, his eyes wide and unfocused. He pointed a thick, accusatory finger directly at my chest, stepping away from the waiter. "Julian, finally, what the hell kind of operation are you running here? This idiot waiter just handed me a bill. A bill for $1,240. He says you only paid for your back room and left us completely out to dry. Fix this right now. Give him your corporate card. We are ready to go home." He shoved the leather folder violently into my chest. I didn't raise my hands to catch it. I simply let it drop. The heavy leather slapped loudly against the hardwood floor. "Pick that up, Mateo," I said to the waiter, never breaking icy eye contact with Felix. Mateo quickly retrieved the folder and stepped quickly behind me for protection. "I am not fixing anything for you, Felix," I said, my voice dripping with absolute, freezing ice. "I told you exactly what this was the moment I walked in here tonight. I invited 12 specific people to a private dinner to celebrate my son. You brought 10 completely uninvited guests. You hijacked a reserved space that did not belong to you, and you ordered market-price items without looking at the cost because you arrogantly assumed I was your personal doormat. You ordered the food. You drank the wine. You pay the bill." Felix stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently like a suffocating fish on a dock. The harsh reality of the situation was finally piercing through the thick, foggy layer of alcohol and unearned arrogance. He turned to Henry and Margaret, his voice cracking with sudden panic. "Dad, tell him to pay it. This is ridiculous. Tell him to pay the bill." Henry looked nervously at the itemized receipt Mateo was holding in his trembling hands. His face went completely pale, resembling a ghost. $1,200? Felix, how on earth did you manage to spend $1,200 in 2 hours? It doesn't matter how much it is right now, Felix shouted, raw panic completely taking over his tone and his posture. Julian has the money. Look at him in his custom-tailored suit. He just got a massive corporate promotion. He owns commercial real estate properties. He can write this entire dinner off as a business expense in his sleep. Julian, stop playing these stupid games and give the man your corporate card right now. We are family. Margaret suddenly stood up, her hands trembling violently. The ultimate enabler was stepping up to the plate to shield her golden child one last time from the consequences of his own actions. She reached out and grabbed my forearm tightly, her manicured nails digging sharply into the expensive fabric of my suit jacket. Julian, please, she whispered, her eyes filling with thick, manipulative tears designed to break my resolve. Do not do this to us. Not here. Not in front of all these important people. Think of Clara. Think of your family's reputation. Felix does not have this kind of cash on him tonight. Just cover it this one time. I swear to you on my life, we will pay you back from our retirement fund on Monday morning. Just make this public nightmare stop right now. I looked down at Margaret's hand gripping my arm. I felt absolutely zero pity for her. She had built this monster piece by piece, and now she was terrified of his roar. I gently but firmly peeled her shaking fingers off my suit, stepping back to create a physical boundary. Pay me back on Monday? I repeated, raising my voice just enough so the neighboring tables could hear the absolute truth clearly. Margaret, you and I both know that is a complete and utter lie. Felix still owes me $300 for the bounce house he never rented for my son 5 years ago. He owes me $500 for the emergency car repair that he actually used to go golfing with Beatrice. I pointed my finger directly at Beatrice. She physically recoiled in her chair, her face burning bright red as the surrounding diners looked at her with blatant judgment. I keep a very strict ledger, Margaret, I continued, stepping closer to Felix, forcing him to back up until his hips hit the edge of the heavy oak table. I know all about the maxed-out credit cards. I know about the predatory payday loans he takes out. I know you and Henry have been secretly draining your 401k and your savings to cover the payments on his leased Porsche just so he can pretend to be a wealthy provider. You treat me like an ATM because you are too terrified to look your 42-year-old son in the face and tell him to get a real job and pay his own bills. Felix's face went from a flushed red to a dangerous, violent shade of purple. He lunged forward, invading my personal space, trying desperately to use his physical size to intimidate me into submission. You arrogant, greedy piece of trash. You think you are better than us because you have a little bit of money in the bank? You are a guest in this family. You owe us respect. You owe my parents respect. I owe you absolutely nothing, I said, standing my ground, planting my feet firmly on the hardwood floor, not flinching a single millimeter. And neither does this restaurant. I will sue this place. Felix screamed, spittle flying from his lips, completely losing control. I will call my lawyer in the morning. I will drag this restaurant through the mud on every single review site on the entire internet. They tricked us. They didn't tell us the specific prices of the daily specials. This is extortion. Lorenzo stepped forward smoothly from the shadows of the hallway. This was the moment. This was the exact, precise moment the entire dynamic of my extended family shifted permanently and irreversibly. Mr. Felix, Lorenzo said, his voice carrying the heavy, undeniable authority of a man who held all the winning cards in a very high-stakes game. I highly advise against making legal threats regarding a lawsuit that you clearly cannot afford to pursue. Every single price for the items you consumed is clearly printed in bold type on the menu you ordered from. Furthermore, you might want to seriously reconsider your aggressive tone when speaking to Mr. Julian in my establishment. Felix scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes in exaggerated disbelief. Why? Because he buys a few expensive steaks here once a year? Because he's some big-shot regular customer? I don't care how much money he spends here. I know my rights. Lorenzo smiled. It was not a polite customer service smile. It was the sharp, dangerous smile of an apex predator watching a mouse run into a corner. No, sir, Lorenzo said smoothly, gesturing highly respectfully toward me with an open palm. Not because he is a customer. Because Mr. Julian is our primary Tier 1 corporate supplier. He is the executive director and a 15% managing shareholder of Sterling Logistics. His firm personally imports every single bottle of the Barolo wine you just aggressively drank. His firm sources, inspects, and delivers the tomahawk ribeye you just consumed. Mr. Julian is not just a guest in my restaurant. He is a part owner of our entire supply chain. He commands absolute respect here. The absolute, crushing silence that fell over table 4 was entirely deafening. It was the kind of heavy, physical silence that violently sucks the oxygen right out of the room. Felix physically staggered backward, bumping hard into the table, rattling the empty crystal wine glasses he had just drained. His jaw dropped open. He looked at me, completely horrified, his eyes wide with the sudden realization of the monumental scale of his miscalculation. He always thought I was just some average corporate middle manager making a decent salary who got lucky with a few investments. He had absolutely no idea that I had aggressively bought into my logistics company years ago. He had no idea I held genuine institutional power in the very high-end establishment he was currently trying to terrorize and defraud. You own part of this? Felix stammered, his booming voice shrinking instantly to a pathetic, high-pitched whisper. I own the supply lines, Felix, I said, casually straightening my tie to emphasize my calm demeanor. I have a heavy corporate black card sitting in my pocket right now. I have the absolute, undisputed authority to sign off on a business development expense at any time. I could pull out a pen right this second, sign Mateo's receipt, and make your $1,200 bill completely disappear into thin air as a corporate tax write-off. It would not cost me a single second of sleep. It would be a rounding error on my monthly expense report. Margaret gasped loudly, a massive wave of pure relief washing over her tear-stained face. She clasped her hands together. Oh, thank God. Julian, thank you. Thank you so much. I knew you wouldn't abandon your brother in his time of need. I knew you had a good heart. I looked at my mother-in-law with eyes as cold as absolute zero. I did not blink. I said I could do it, Margaret. I said slowly, letting every word hang in the air. I did not say I would. I turned back to Felix, making sure he saw the absolute finality and lack of mercy in my eyes. I am choosing, deliberately and consciously, to let you drown tonight. I am choosing not to save you. You disrespected my wife. You hijacked my son's birthday dinner. You stole money from me in the past. And you did it all while smiling in my face and mocking my boundaries. You are not my brother. You are a parasite, and I do not fund parasites. I turned to Lorenzo, completely dismissing Felix from my reality. Lorenzo, this table is completely unaffiliated with me, my family, or Sterling Logistics. Treat them exactly as you would any other off-the-street walk-in customer who attempts blatant theft of services. Call the local authorities if they cannot produce a valid form of payment within the next 10 minutes. Understood, Mr. Shareholder, Lorenzo said sharply, signaling with 2 fingers to a pair of large, imposing security guards waiting near the front doors. Felix panicked. It was a complete animalistic panic. He patted his pockets frantically, pulling out his wallet and fumbling with 2 different plastic credit cards. Fine. I'll pay the damn bill. Run this card. Run it right now. He shoved a blue credit card aggressively at Mateo. Mateo took it quietly to the terminal at the host stand. We all watched in heavy silence. 10 seconds later, the machine beeped a harsh, flat rejection. Decline, sir, Mateo called out across the room. Felix swore violently, kicking the leg of the table. He threw a second card at the waiter. Run the Visa. Run it. The limit should be clear. Mateo ran it. Beep. Declined for insufficient funds, sir. Felix looked wildly at Vanessa, his face pale. Give me your card. Give me your purse. Vanessa was hyperventilating, clutching her designer bag to her chest. It's maxed out, Felix. We used it to pay the leasing company for the Porsche on Tuesday to avoid a repo. We don't have anything left. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the pathetic begging. I had delivered my absolute message. The bomb had successfully detonated, destroying the facade, and I was entirely immune to the blast radius. I turned my back on them and walked away. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. I walked back down the quiet hallway and stepped into the executive boardroom, closing the heavy mahogany door securely behind me, entirely shutting out the desperate, chaotic sound of Felix arguing with the restaurant security guards. I took a deep, grounding breath, let the residual adrenaline flush completely out of my system, and put my warm, confident smile back on my face. All right, who is ready for some more cake? I asked cheerfully, looking directly at Silas, who was completely engrossed in opening the intricate parts of his new drone. Clara immediately pulled me aside near the large bay window, out of earshot of the other guests. Julian, what happened out there? Did you pay it? She asked, her voice tight with decades of conditioned worry. She fully assumed I had done what I always did in the early years of our marriage. Cleaned up the toxic financial mess to keep the precarious family peace intact. I looked my beautiful wife deeply in the eyes and held her hands. No, Clara. I didn't pay a single cent. They are currently dealing with Lorenzo, the security team, and the massive bill they racked up. The safety net is completely gone forever. Tonight, they face the brutal reality of their choices. Clara looked completely terrified for a split second. She was instinctively conditioned to fear her parents' inevitable wrath and the emotional blackmail that always followed Felix's failures. But then she slowly looked over at Silas. She looked at how genuinely happy he was, entirely shielded from the chaos, laughing with his friends. She took a deep, shaky breath, and the fear vanished from her eyes, replaced by a profound, life-altering sense of relief. Okay, she said softly, her grip on my hands tightening. Okay. Thank you, Julian. Thank you for protecting us. We finished the birthday party at 10 p.m. on the dot. The logistical challenge now was the extraction protocol. How do I get my parents and Silas's young friends out of the building without forcing them to walk past the active crime scene and screaming match happening at table 4? I pulled out my phone and texted Lorenzo. Can you arrange a discreet exit for my party through the rear kitchens to the staff alley? I want to keep the kids completely away from the front lobby and whatever mess Felix is making. Lorenzo replied instantly. Already handled, Mr. Julian. The valet has brought your vehicles around to the back loading dock. The kitchen staff is expecting you and has cleared a safe path. We led the group through the massive, bustling, stainless steel kitchens. The kids thought it was a brilliant backstage adventure, waving at the chefs who smiled back warmly. We stepped out into the cool, refreshing night air of the quiet back alley. As I was securely buckling Silas into his seatbelt in the back of my truck, I heard the faint, distinct, piercing sound of a police siren approaching the front entrance of the restaurant. The blue and red flashing lights reflected sharply off the brick walls of the adjacent buildings in the alleyway. I closed Silas's door, got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove my family home in absolute, beautiful, peaceful silence. The full, devastating, and entirely pathetic details of what happened inside the restaurant after I left came out the very next morning. As soon as Clara and I woke up and checked our phones, we saw that her phone had 47 missed calls and dozens of unhinged, frantic text messages from her parents and Vanessa. But we didn't get the actual truth from them. They would only spin lies to make themselves the victims. We got the undeniable truth from Lorenzo, who called my direct line at 9 a.m. with a full, professional incident report. When Felix's credit cards inevitably declined due to insufficient funds, absolute chaos ensued at the table. Beatrice, the supposed best friend that Felix was so desperately trying to impress with his fake displays of wealth, saw the massive security guards moving in closely. She realized instantly that she was about to be implicated in a massive dine and dash scenario. She suddenly stood up, grabbed her 2 toddlers aggressively by the arms, and loudly announced to the entire room, "I need to go to my car to get some emergency diapers for the baby. I will be right back in 2 minutes." She walked quickly out the front door, leaving her cheap coat on the chair, and literally sprinted across the parking lot to her Honda Civic. She abandoned Felix completely, peeling out of the parking lot and sticking him with her entire share of the massive seafood tower, the expensive desserts, and the wine. It was the ultimate poetic betrayal among fake friends. She ghosted him completely when the chips were down. With absolutely no money, 0 available credit, and no wealthy brother-in-law to save him from his own gluttony, Lorenzo gave Felix a very stark, unyielding ultimatum. Pay the bill in full right now or leave the premises in handcuffs for felony theft of services. The police officers were standing right there in the lobby, arms crossed, waiting for Lorenzo's signal. To desperately avoid spending the night in a dirty jail cell and facing criminal charges, Felix was forced to empty his pockets completely. He had to leave his brand new iPhone 14 Pro Max and his flashy designer watch with Lorenzo as physical, tangible collateral. But here is the ultimate, hilarious humiliation of the entire night. When Lorenzo carefully inspected the heavy gold watch, he immediately recognized the cheap movement and the flawed logo. It was a fake Rolex, a complete, worthless counterfeit bought online. Lorenzo, refusing to accept fake collateral for a real debt, forced Henry, my enabler father-in-law, to surrender his actual, solid gold wedding band to make up the massive difference in value. They were given exactly 24 hours to return to the restaurant with $1,240 in hard, untraceable cash to retrieve their personal items, or Lorenzo would officially file the police report and hand over the security footage to the authorities. But the financial domino effect of my refusal to pay had only just begun to topple their fragile lives. To get the cash the next morning, Felix had to drive frantically to 3 different out-of-network ATMs and completely drain his checking account, pushing his bank's overdraft protection to its absolute maximum, penalizing limit. He paid hundreds of dollars in exorbitant, predatory overdraft fees just to scrape the exact cash together to get his phone and his father's ring back. because his primary bank account went drastically into the negative thousands. A massive, scheduled automatic payment for his leased Porsche Cayenne bounced hard on Monday morning. The leasing company, who was already incredibly tired of his consistent late payments and excuses over the last year, did not hesitate for a single second. On Wednesday afternoon, while Felix was casually mowing his front lawn pretending everything was fine, a heavy-duty, flatbed tow truck pulled aggressively into his driveway. They legally repossessed the luxury SUV right in front of all his nosy, judging neighbors, hauling it away while Felix screamed at the driver. The facade was completely and utterly shattered. The fragile castle built entirely on sand and lies had finally collapsed violently into the ocean. That Friday evening, Clara received a phone call from her father, Henry. He didn't sound angry anymore. He didn't sound demanding. He sounded incredibly old, broken, and completely defeated by the reality of his choices. "Clara," Henry said, his voice trembling heavily over the speakerphone as we sat in our kitchen. We don't know what to do anymore. Felix's car is completely gone. He is facing a massive lawsuit from a credit card collection agency for unpaid debts. And Margaret and we are tapped out. We have absolutely nothing left to give him." Clara held the phone tightly, her hand remarkably steady. "What do you mean you have nothing left, Dad? You had a great pension." Henry broke down sobbing, the sound of a man who had lost everything for nothing. "We remortgaged the house last year to pay off his secret gambling debts. We drained my entire 401k to cover his lifestyle. We used every single penny of the money from your grandmother's inheritance. It's all gone, Clara. We have absolutely no retirement left. We enabled him until he bled us completely dry. Julian was right. Julian was right about everything, and we were too proud and too incredibly stupid to listen to him." Hearing Henry verbally admit the brutal truth was a profound, deeply necessary moment of closure for Clara. Her parents had willingly sacrificed their own financial security, the peace of their marriage, and their comfortable retirement years, all to blindly fund the destructive delusion of a 42-year-old man who absolutely refused to grow up and take responsibility for his own life. They foolishly thought that giving him money over and over again was an act of unconditional love. They didn't realize until it was entirely too late that they were just buying the heavy bricks he used to build his own inescapable prison. Clara didn't scream at her father. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just took a deep breath and said, "I am so incredibly sorry you are going through this, Dad. I really am. But you and Mom created this situation, and you have to navigate this completely on your own. Julian and I are entirely focused on protecting our own family now. We cannot and will not fix this for you." And then, she hung up the phone gently. She established the absolute, unbreakable, ironclad boundary that finally saved our sanity and our marriage. It has been exactly 1 full year since the explosive, life-altering incident at Lucas Italian Steakhouse. Silas just turned 11 last week. We went back to Lucas to celebrate his birthday, just the 3 of us this time, completely free of any extended family drama. Lorenzo greeted us at the massive front doors with a massive, genuine smile and a firm, respectful handshake. We sat in the quiet, peaceful alcove, the exact same spot Felix had tried to hijack a year ago. I ordered a spectacular cut of prime rib, Clara had the blackened salmon, and Silas happily ate his favorite pasta dish. I looked at the leather-bound menu out of sheer curiosity. The 2018 Barolo wine is now listed at $150 a bottle. Inflation really is hitting everyone hard these days. I chuckled quietly to myself, closed the menu, and ordered a simple glass of the house red instead. Tasted like absolute, undeniable victory. A lot of people in my extended family, the flying monkeys who always try to enforce toxic family loyalty, asked me if I regret how I handled that night. Clara's Aunt Linda actually called me a few weeks after the incident, aggressively accusing me of being cruel, vindictive, and heartless. She loudly asked if I felt guilty for directly causing Felix to lose his luxury car and for humiliating my elderly in-laws in a public setting. I always give them the exact same unwavering answer. I do not regret a single second of it. I would do it exactly the same way 1,000 times over. I frequently think about the $1,240 that Felix desperately tried to steal from me that night through manipulation and social pressure. That exact amount of money did not disappear into the void. I didn't selfishly spend it on myself or buy a new watch. The very next morning after the incident, I logged into my banking portal and transferred exactly $1,240 into a high-yield 529 college savings fund, specifically set up for Silas. It is sitting securely right there right now, compounding interest, growing stronger every single day. Instead of being turned into literal sewage by Felix's unchecked gluttony and arrogance. That money is going to help buy my son's expensive university textbooks. It is going to help build his bright, secure future. By cutting Felix off completely, brutally, and publicly, I didn't just protect my own hard-earned assets. I actually forced him to finally face the harsh, unforgiving reality of the real world. I heard recently through the family grapevine that Felix and Vanessa are currently enrolled in intensive, mandatory debt counseling to avoid filing for total bankruptcy. He lost his fake luxury life, his flashy car, and his country club membership. He was forced to swallow his massive ego and take a grueling minimum-wage management job at a local hardware store just to keep the electricity turned on in his house. They are struggling intensely, yes, but for the very first time in his entire adult life, Felix is struggling with the actual truth, instead of comfortably drowning in a funded lie provided by his parents. We hosted the mandatory Thanksgiving dinner at our house this year, but this time we set the strict rules of engagement. No drama. No asking for personal loans, no complaining about how unfair the world is. Surprisingly, Felix and Vanessa actually showed up. They arrived in a beat-up, 10-year-old used Honda Civic that he bought for cash. He wore a plain, unbranded sweater instead of flashy designer labels with the tags still attached. He was incredibly quiet throughout the entire meal. He didn't boast about investments. He didn't demand the best cut of turkey. He just ate his food and helped clear the plates. He didn't formally apologize to me, of course. A narcissist's fragile ego rarely allows for a genuine, heartfelt apology. But as he was leaving at the end of the night, he stopped at my front door, looked down at his scuffed, cheap shoes, and extended his hand toward me. "Thanks for dinner, Julian," he said quietly, his voice lacking all of its previous arrogance. "The food was really good. We appreciate it." I shook his hand firmly. "Drive safe, Felix," I replied. There was a new, begrudging respect in his tired eyes. He finally understood that I saw right through his entire act, and he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I would never ever be his financial mark again. Sometimes, the absolute best gift you can ever give yourself in this short life is a concrete, impenetrable boundary. And sometimes, the absolute most loving, necessary gift you can give an entitled, deeply toxic family member is a hard, unyielding, highly public no. You cannot fit a lifestyle of imported champagne onto a budget of tap water. You cannot build a secure, thriving future for your own children if you let parasites constantly drain your present resources. And you absolutely, positively, cannot fit your massive, unearned ego onto my corporate tab. When I walked out of that steakhouse a year ago, leaving the absolute chaos, the fake Rolex, and the police sirens behind me, I felt a massive, suffocating weight lift entirely off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying for a decade. I took back total, undisputed control of my life, my finances, and my family's peace of mind. And I will never, ever apologize for protecting what is rightfully mine. Have you ever faced something similar with your own entitled family members? Did you pay up just to keep the peace and swallow your pride? Or did you finally stand your ground, draw a line in the sand, and let the chips fall where they may? Share your unique story in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and it reminds me that none of us are alone in dealing with these kinds of people. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey we take together. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and always protect your boundaries.